You would expect the last Kirby title on the DS to be one of the mainline entries, but Mass Attack ended this successful era of the franchise with one of the most unique titles in a series full of strange experiments. Divided into multiple Kirbys, you navigate with a group of pink gluttons all at once and attack as a group instead of using Kirby's trademark skills. Just like with other spin-offs, this concept offers itself greatly for interesting boss opportunities, and without giving away too much, you would be surprised how unexpectedly ambitious they are. In order to not create any confusions or mix enemies together, I'm going to focus only on the main bosses at the end of each world, just like I do with the mainline titles. Also, the slightly harder variations at the end of the game will not be ranked separately and put together with their original version, since they don't change things up too much. No matter how outlandish the premise of a Kirby game is, you can always count on Whispy to appear in some shape or form, and this time it goes into the sky. By destroying parts of his wooden body, Whispy starts to increase his height and hides himself at the top screen without a chance to reach him. Slowly taking each segment apart is the key to victory, and surprisingly enough, this battle becomes much easier with only a few Kirbys. The balance of this gameplay lies in keeping as much Kirbys as possible in your group to expand your attack power, but leaving yourself more vulnerable for the opponent's attacks. It's basically like a heavyweight in a fighting game. The bigger and stronger your squad is, the more likely it becomes to receive hits. Classic Whispy skills like falling fruits become much more difficult to dodge, and while you can tank some damage and receive Kirbys once they try to go to heaven, many players will try to go for the gold medal, which requires you to leave the battle uninjured. Whispy himself guards his body parts with either covering them in bouncy mushrooms, flicking your Kirbys across the arena, or spikes. Other DS Kirby titles never really made use of the double screen of the handheld, and it's a little odd to see the final entry to utilize a feature that can enhance the experience quite a bit. Whispy's harder counterpart only increases the speed of the fight and general challenge in a very slight way, which is something every boss will do as well. One thing I need to complain about now before mentioning it every time is the boss music. For some reason, nearly all of Mass Attack's main bosses use a new rearrangement of King Dedede's theme. There's nothing wrong with this iconic piece of music, but admittedly a little ill-fitting to simply utilize it for a standard boss. Mass Attack consists of such a fantastic soundtrack. In fact, it was partly done by the same composer of Mother 3, and I would have loved to see a unique musical take on this unique spin-off. After the mandatory Whispy encounter, it's time for the first proper original boss of the game and second main enemy of World 2, Lady Ivy. Being placed on a shaky metal plate, you have to press down the battlefield and hit the antagonistic plant's head with as much Kirbys as possible. You will see this trend later on, but Mass Attack tries to succeed in making every main boss a true memorable confrontation with unlike premises how to fight. Whispy required you to simply flick Kirbys with no necessity for a big group. Lady Ivy, on the other hand, plays with the weight, and the more Kirbys you have, the easier it becomes to let the metal plate fall. Of course, you have to be as fast as possible, as the quick head bump your opponent does before getting confused throws all the Kirbys to the other side, giving you less time to react back. The main challenge comes from keeping an eye out at the top screen with multiple obstacles falling from above. Sometimes it's little needles, but often Lady Ivy can summon weak enemies only there to hurdle the balance of the plate. The only annoying downside I see with this concept is waiting for your turn. Once you miss the chance of executing a strike, there's the chance of waiting through all the long-winded attacks again. The only inconvenience in an otherwise surprisingly individual battle for being the second boss. So far, we are going with the order of the game, and fitting to his triple letter name, King Dedede catches the 3rd place, after infiltrating his peaceful resort. There's luckily no forced possession plot this time, but a good old clash between those classic rivals. With Dedede hiding at the top screen in his hot air balloon, you have to kick his bubble bombs back and line up the correct timing to hit the self-proclaimed king with the mighty explosion. Some of those bombs fire up quicker than others, and if you don't get a rhythm for how to encounter this game of timing, it can turn into quite the chaos with a lot of injured Kirbys. After enough explosions, Dedede drops to the ground, giving you a chance to assault him, which is not necessary to win. Both direct hits and the explosions deal damage, so while the basic gameplay loop might be a little tricky, it shouldn't be too exhausting to win. After the first phase, Dedede goes for a direct confrontation and swings his hammer, guarding his body. By switching the right side at the right moment, you get the chance to attack his back, ultimately winning the battle. With only a handful bosses in this game, at first I was hesitant about Dedede's inclusion after Whispy was already taking a slot. New enemies are much more appreciated in title like that, but luckily the creators deliver with a creative take on the king's battle style. As I mentioned before, this clash goes for something different again and underlines the dexterity aspect of the game. Juggling the bombs with the right timing and keeping an eye out for both screens makes amazing use of the features of the DS, and while it's easy to call Mass Attack too gimmicky, it's also extremely confident in utilizing the handheld special traits like no other title before. My one real downside with the brawl is one missing surprise in some shape or form. The whole staging is kinda one-sided, and for the 3rd boss I expected at least one unexpected turn of events. Dedede's harder counterpart doesn't deliver on that front either, but I was still enjoying this old rivalry on Dedede's personal resort. It would have been perfect to follow the game's progression, but the final boss and puppeteer behind Mass Attack, Necrodius, misses the top and dwells on the 2nd place instead. After this intimidating monster separated Kirby into multiple pink balls, your moment for revenge comes, and without any dialogues or cutscenes, the climax is about to start. Going with classic Nintendo fashion, you have to take out his robust skeleton hands first, before heading for the head. Only the backside of each fist is vulnerable and can only be damaged by flicking, which is why it's important to waste no time. One smash with the hand is enough to take out a Kirby immediately, and Necrodius' technique of putting his fists together to lure you in might give you an opportunity to counter, but is also a trap which can kill every Kirby at once if you're too greedy. After putting your enemy into a corner, the 2nd phase begins without solid ground, and even though you're now floating, it's just the underwater controls. Luckily, unlike in most games, they are quite comfy to use, giving you free range to move around and gather every Kirby at once. Hiding in corners, Necrodius occasionally appears and charges a powerful laser, but leaving himself open for a counterattack. It's a similar case like with the hands, where you must balance how much damage you want to deal, or play safe and retreat after a couple seconds. Naturally, his little henchmen cannot be missed out and stall the battle with their number instead of actual force. The 2nd phase seems to be quite easier, considering how much space and time there is to avoid most antagonistic skills. There is something of a climax at the end, but nothing that rivals the highs of other Kirby finals. It does not have the overwhelming framerate destroying chaos of Yin Yang or eerie atmosphere of Drawsia's Soul, but seems comparable to Amazing Mirror with a clumsy, sudden transition to the ending sequence. This is also the main reason why Necrodius could not be put on the highest place, since just like with Dedede, there is something missing. Be it an additional phase, final attack to avoid, or any kind of climactic climactic finisher. The whole battle feels too straightforward and ironically doesn't play with any unseen twist to a feature. This is not to say Mass Attack's final is bad, as it makes use of every skill you learn throughout the game and does not come across as frustrating or overblown. Still, I wish Necrodius would have been as intimidating as his design and maybe present one last trick to truly impress me. There's something special about larger-than-life colossus and fighting them, especially as someone as small as Kirby, really sells the point of a David vs Goliath confrontation. Scarlet is such an opponent and sits at the top of an active volcano bombarding your squad with fiery rocks and all sorts of dangerous hazards. By defending the platform which transports you from all those attacks, you come closer and closer to your target and ultimately tackle the beast directly. Here the battle continues to a little dexterity section with timed cannons to inflict damage by shooting straight into his head. After that, the whole ordeal repeats, but this time you must collect the former destroyable rocks and have to be more cautious about your movement. It goes without saying that Scarlet is the most exceptional boss among Mass Attack's selection of enemies, and while it might be a little too gimmicky for some players, I greatly enjoyed the remarkable setup to offer something surprising. After 3 bosses, utilizing the game's tricks and controls to the fullest, there was only so much to be done with Mass Attack's concept, and even though it's most likely a mini-game to some extent, there's still more than enough standard gameplay you learn throughout the game. The first phase incorporates everything you know, and it's only the second phase where things become situational. On top of that, this is the only boss to present a unique boss theme apart from the final boss, something that should have done for every other one as well. Generally, this is one of those bosses that works with the limitations of the hardware amazingly, and there's never a point where it feels dull or unimpressive. The presence of Scarlet having a special theme, the varied gameplay and more than satisfying length makes this boss, rightfully so, the best battle in the game. When I first played Mass Attack many years ago, I didn't expect to be so impressed by its bosses. Former Kirby spin-offs conditioned me to look forward to some kind of gimmick, mini-games resembling bosses to some extent, but Mass Attack understands its premise greatly and offers opponents you can only experience in this game. There's not a single foe I would consider disappointing, and although the game is fairly short and features only a couple main bosses, every one of them left a fulfilling impression.